In her bio, recorded for Writers Radio, Yehudit Silverman says, "I'm in awe of how the art can give voice to what feels unspeakable. This observation feels to me like a guiding principle which has shone throughout her work as dancer, dance therapist, creative art therapist, author, filmmaker, and now poet." Welcome to Writers Radio. I'm Carol Harmon, your host for today's episode, I Am Not the Darkness, with Yehudit Silverman. Welcome to Writers Radio, Yehudit. You say in your bio, "At this stage of my journey, I've returned to my 10-year-old self when poetry was as natural as a fresh dream."
I feel like it feels like coming home to write. It feels like it has the underground river quality of something that's always been there, that's always existed, but I was too busy to pay attention. So now I'm listening to that underground river. The calling. I have to lean into longing like a pilgrim whose hands are empty. Only wind and perhaps the whisper of a cellular calling I never asked for. A child held tight by secrets, a corset, no breath, no becoming the wilderness that grows unbidden between ribs, between lips, between pilgrim and prayer. You look at my long robe and see starlight, as if I can lead you easily through the dark, as if my feet don't bleed as they open. Tell me how to be in this wild walking, how to feel the flight of all things lifted. Tell me.
What currents are you finding in the river?
I think for me it's usually a response to what I'm encountering, whether it's my parents dying, whether it's the horrific things that are happening in the world, whether it's the environment.
Well, I thought we would start by listening to your recordings of poems that address a most urgent theme of humanity's ongoing addiction to violence.
Israel, Gaza. It's the teenagers dancing, skirts waving over desert sands, electronic music, arms open to the night sky. It's the elderly grandmother walking slowly with her grandson, both unsteady on their feet. It's the pregnant woman lifting a glass of red pomegranate juice to her tired, chapped lips. It's the way the rabbi holds the Torah as if it could save him. It's the way the imam bows, prayer on his lips. It's the weight of a baby's head. Whose blood is worth more? You want me to choose, to remember the ashes, the ovens, the way I was spit on in first grade. You want me to wear my Jewish star as a weapon, or to rip it from my neck. Either way, you lose, we lose. A small country, a desert, the scent of olive and lemon trees, the ghost of Abraham lifting his knife, the sacrifice of children. You want me to be certain, to end on a good note, but I can't. Hineni, here I am. Refugia. Refugia is a scientific term referring to places that become safe spaces for organisms and life to endure in the midst of upheaval. The night of 1,000 stars won't keep you safe as you run on desert sands. Let me tell you about the prophets, yours and mine, how they listened to the poetry of the Persian lynx, how they kept each other warm night after night. Blessed be the stranger, the one you don't know, whose body is still, whose breath is gone. I have no purpose now but to offer you bread, wine, a wet cloth to cleanse your wounds. You have no purpose now but to offer me the same. How did we end up here, fighting for a piece of this dry land? The night of 1,000 stars won't keep you safe. See the young lovers holding hands as the bombs fall. Hear the cry of a newborn babe lifted gently out of the rubble. Hurry, your plate is waiting. Hurry, soldiers can't tell us apart. Our Semitic curly hair like snakes slithering down our backs. If only we could stop running. There must be a place, a refugia, where both of us are welcome.
When did you write these two poems, Yehudit?
Well, the first one, Israel in Gaza, was written probably about a week after October 7th. And Refugia was written probably 2 months or 3 months after that. So it was kind of an ongoing internal processing of what I was seeing and the horror of it all.
Mm-hmm.
I think they hopefully speak for themselves.
You have created 2 ongoing projects which help people suffering from personal trauma, The Story Within and The Hidden Face of Suicide. Would you tell us a bit about that work?
The Story Within, Myth and Fairy Tale in Therapy, evolved out of my clinical work. I worked as a creative arts therapist in many different hospitals in Montreal with diverse populations. And a lot of them were people that were suffering from eating disorders, suicidal ideation. Some had attempted suicide, depression, a lot of mental illness. And clinicians were finding it very difficult, a lot of them, to reach them. So as a therapist, I was lucky to have creative tools. And what I realized was that working with fiction, working with a story, allowed them to access parts of themselves that were very difficult to access any other way. Because this gave some distance to their suffering. So it was easier to work with because they identified with a character from a myth or fairy tale or traditional story. And they work with this character through different mediums, making masks, using art, using movement. And the identification becomes very strong, and they work with what the obstacle is for that character. And often they're able to work through their own obstacle by working through the obstacle with their character. And at the very end of it, the end of the whole process, they realize what it is that is a wound that hasn't been accessed before, a place inside of them that feels blocked, that feels like they can't work through it any other way, particularly verbally, because so much of our trauma, particularly trauma, is unconscious and somatic, right? It lives in the body. It lives in our unconscious. So if we talk about it, we just kind of go around with what we think of as kind of a superficial telling of, oh, this is our story.
Yes.
But we never get to the hidden aspects.
Yes.
And so through the arts allows it gradually and slowly to uncover what's been hidden. So that's how it came about. It came about clinically, and then I taught a course in it and trained people for 20 years at Concordia when I taught there. And then I wrote the book. Well, actually made the movie first, which follows people going through the process. And then I wrote the book.
And are you still actively working with this today?
No, I decided because I wanted to focus on my writing.
Yes.
I also have this novel that's coming through me. So it feels a little bit like the story within has evolved into these characters that want their story told. So I'm honoring that and giving space for that. But people are doing it around the world, and it's wonderful. Like for me, the book and the film, I just want people to use it and to hope that it can be helpful. I am not the darkness. I am not a tree, but sometimes when the wind is just right and the moon too dark to see, I grow roots. My thirst is vast. Even my dreams are parched and filled with dust. I am not a beauty, but sometimes when my hips sway this way and that, my hair wild and free, even the turtles lift their ancient eyes, perhaps worth the wait they say. I am not the darkness, and yet I can walk through it singing, a lullaby of sorts, gentle enough to coax the tired beast of night to lay down its claws just for a while. And oh, how we rest. I am not a temple, and yet this silence is more than I ever prayed for. This chasm of broken earth through which I have fallen time after time and landed hard, dazed, shattered, is also the one place I know will lead me stumbling into the light.
After The Story Within, you did another whole project called The Hidden Face of Suicide.
Yeah, and that really evolved because in my own family there was a suicide that I only found out about when I was 17 by accident. It was my uncle, and no one had ever talked about it. So it's always haunted me, and I decided at Concordia to do research around the stigma and silence that still surrounds, sadly, still surrounds suicide. So I started attending a self-help support group, which was called Family Survivors of Suicide. And everyone in this group lost family to suicide. The facilitator lost 2 sons.
Wow.
And yeah. So I attended the group for like 6 months and heard about the trauma, the pain, the incredible suffering. But what really got to me was the stigma and the feeling that they felt like they had to wear a mask, their word, and that people didn't want to talk to them about it, didn't want to hear about it. And suicide is such a different kind of grieving, such a complicated grief, right? Because if you lose somebody to illness, it's horrible, but there's no blame, there's no guilt, there's no anger. And with suicide, there's so much guilt. There's so much I should have, I could have. Why didn't I notice this? Why didn't I do anything? So it's a very hard, hard grief. And I made the film with their cooperation. 5 of them from the group were in the film. And my parents were also in the film and talk about my uncle for the first time. And my dad actually gets to say goodbye to him. And it was, I think I made the film, I wanted to help break the silence. I wanted to show survivors telling their own story and talking about how hard it is when people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
The danger of secrets and silence. And what's been most gratifying about the film has traveled a lot, much more than I have. And in the audience, when I'm there, people will stand up and they'll tell their story about suicide, and often for the first time. Like one time, I can't remember what screening it was. I think it was in Montreal, actually. A woman stood up and she said, I'm 80 years old. When I was 20, my mother took her own life. I've never talked about it until now.
Wow.
For 60 years, she said, I've been too ashamed. And it was like, I mean, everybody in the audience was very moved. And I just thought, wow, like this poor woman, on top of grieving, for 60 years, she held that stigma and shame. And so that's been most gratifying, is to feel like the film gave permission to people in the audience to tell their own story. And also, I think gave a sense of meaning to the survivors that were in the film.
Yes.
Because they attended a lot of the screenings and people came up to them. And, when you lose someone by suicide, it's very hard to find any meaning in that.
Yeah.
So to give back, to be in a film and to see that it's helping others, I think it really helped them.
It must be so satisfying to do this kind of work and see the immediate effects with people. Not a theory, not another system, but something that's so immediate and observable.
Mm. Yeah. And I just feel like there's so many things that are hidden that need to be brought into the light, right? So
I think so too. It's amazing how much stigma there still is around suicide, mental illness, so many things.
yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that your parents were involved with that film, but you've since lost them, haven't you?
Yeah, I have. In the last 2 years, I lost my dad and my mom.
And we have some poems of yours writing about those experiences.
Lingering. Soft blanket, hard choices. My dying father's body stretched thin, translucent. Heart giving way, memories intact. One strawberry in a vodka tonic, bells echoing down a ski mountain. His head out the train window, deep breath. Now an oxygen tank sets a rhythmic tone to these final days. He says he wants a quicksilver ending, the trail of a jet taking off, but instead, lingering, fighting, fists out. Death song. Why do we pray for the dead? Sing as body becomes bone. Are we waiting for something to happen? Like the crow who stands by the side of the road, solemn in his black shroud. I ask because I do it. Gospel for my best friend laid out in white, she would hate it. Hebrew chants for another. And my father lying still on the bed, his old eyes young just before. I swooped in with song. Like the crow, I can't help it. Something about death that draws me in, tells me in its own dark voice what to do. And it's choiceless as the cry of a newborn still wet with womb. I try with language to lift the veil, see a little more than I know. As my mother, hollowed out, takes her last breath, I raise my voice in gratitude for this black-shrouded, wing-tipped wonder, that we can offer it all up in song, the bones, the beauty, the breaking apart.
Were those deaths really close together?
No, my friend, who was my best friend, died when she was 39. And we were the same age. So
That's a long time ago.
it's a long time ago. Dad was extremely with it till the last moment. My mom had a bit of memory loss for the last 2 years, year and a half of her life. But I feel very privileged that I was with them both when they died.
I was with both my parents as well, and it was most incredible experience of my life, really.
Yes. Yeah, it really is. And with my mother, my brother and my 2 nieces were also there. And it was a 4-day period. And there was singing. I was playing the guitar, and we were singing and dancing. And at one point, we had Rock Around the Clock on because that was my mother's favorite song. And she was pretty out of it. And then at one point, she just started shimmying her shoulders a little bit. So obviously she was hearing the music. But
Yeah.
it's an amazing opportunity to be able to accompany people. Grieving is its own landscape. And I feel like it's a place that if we can have the courage to go there, I feel like it's a very enriching, transformative journey. I'm so filled, I guess, with gratitude for even my best friend who died so young. She was pregnant when she was diagnosed and had young children, but still being with her on that last passage, I am eternally grateful for that. Gutted. I stand in the ocean, seaweed wrapped, consecrated in sand, and whatever words the waves leave behind. I grow gills so I can sing with fish-tailed ladies, hovering always below the surface. The rumble of motorboats, careless laughter of a water skier in a bikini. She doesn't see the rogue wave in the distance. Disaster on a sunny day. Not supposed to happen. My best friend from childhood called me every year on my birthday, sang a different tune, until one year, no song, just the news, stage 4 breast cancer. She held her pregnant belly and asked me, what should I do? Fish-tailed ladies taught me well how to sing with no breath. She kept the baby. Our last summer as mothers together, children crawling in sand, we walk slowly to the ocean, my friend holding on to me, limping, bandaged. I pick up a thick strand of glistening brown seaweed, wrap it around her gently, cancer in every bone. Gutted, hairless, like a newborn newt, she says, laughing. And we stand together, always.
Did losing her so young, did that have an influence in the direction your life went? Because one way or another, you've been walking in the fields of deep grief with all of your work, as far as I can see.
I think because I was so young, it made me recognize how fragile life is.
Yeah.
And also that I could be there
Mhm.
in the darkness, that I could be there in the grieving. And that was a place that I felt comfortable to assist and be helpful. And I didn't know that before I was with my friend
Uh-huh.
in her dying, and people were kind of relying on me to
Yes.
hold it and ritualize it. And so I think it was, a recognition that that was part of my path. I think you're right. I didn't think about it until you asked that. So thank you.
You're welcome. You have been listening to Montreal poet and creative art therapist Yehudit Silverman, former chair of the Department of Creative Art Therapies, Concordia University in Montreal. We close this episode with a final poem.
Blessings. May you learn the ways of calling and whispering, words weaving through silence, the soft surround of held prayer. Lean back, loved one, you will be seen. This holiness does not need bended knee, hands folded, or even the surrender of serenity. This is your birthright in the image of all that sings and dances and glory to gather in circles, in solitude, in the calling itself, unnamed, unadorned, unknown, whispering, whispering, all is one, all is one.
There are many interviews and articles online about Yehudit's work, The Story Within, Myth and Fairy Tale in Therapy, and The Hidden Face of Suicide. Books and films of both these projects are available for purchase online and through Yehudit's website, yehuditsilverman.com. Thank you, Yehudit, for collaborating on this moving episode. Best wishes with your novel and poetry. Thanks as well to my talented co-producers, Ingrid Rose and Gary Sill. Gary is our music and technical producer who composes original music for each episode. And special thanks to you, dear listener. This episode is also available as a podcast at writersradio.ca or wherever you get your podcasts. Sign up for our program announcement newsletter to help spread the word about Writers Radio.
You have been listening to Writers Radio, a non-commercial collaborative project which presents talented writers reading their own work. These stories, essays, and conversations revisit the long tradition of oral storytelling that connects us to the inspiration behind the words. Be sure to check the website, writersradio.ca, to subscribe to our free notifications list. It's also a way of letting the writers know you are there and appreciating their creative work.
Writers Radio broadcasts from Half Moon Bay on the Sunshine Coast in Canada, traditional tribal land of the Sechelt Nation of the Coast Salish peoples. We express our gratitude for their wisdom teachings and land stewardship.